Set podcast. And today you get to listen in a conversation I'm about to have with Dr. Heather Browne. And she is the author of Speaking with the Heart, a super duper cool book that you can see I already have bookmarks in. And I'm so glad to have you here. Hello, Heather. How are you doing?
I am so honored to be here with you.
It's so fun because you and we don't live that far away, but we met because we had the same coach for our TED Talk. So it's really interesting. It blows me away how people come together, right?
And how perfect that was at that time with it being right in your backyard. Yeah,
For real.
wonderful.
It
Wonderful.
was so cool. I mean, I remember it's what we just talked about, all when we're trying to go towards a goal, like we both were, we had both just randomly reached out to the same coach. And so I had seen you practicing. And at that same time, I was also practicing, getting ready for this big journey of being on the TED stage. And then, yeah, I got to come see you speak at your TEDx talk at Mount Rubidoux. And it was really, really cool. You looked like an angel up there. It was so awesome to watch you speak.
One of the
So
things you said following touched my heart really deep. I'm like, oh, I want to know this woman better.
I just want you to tell my audience a little bit about you. How did you get into wanting to be a psychotherapist and write? And just tell me a little bit about yourself.
You got it. So I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years, and I specialize in couples and communication, connection, intimacy, and grief and loss. And it completely came about because of my childhood. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so living with someone who doesn't live in the same reality as you is challenging in connection, in communication, and at times in compassion. And so I spend a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to understand how to reach her and how to help her and how to support her. And tragically, she chose to take her life when I was 16.
Mm.
And in seeing that despair that she went through, I knew that with my knowledge base, I had a lot of information that I could use to help others. And it just went from there. Very quickly, it became very clear that I see things, do things, and engage with people differently because of having lived with somebody who had such a hard time doing life. So
Yeah.
I'm much more gracious. I'm much more invested. I'm much more strategic. And all of these things have just come into the work that I do. And the writing, I started my life as an actress, and I fell in love with literature, and I fell in love with language and monologues. And then I just felt compelled to write, and it just flows out of me. I just have a poetic nature. And so I have two poetry books I wrote years ago. And so the work I do is communication. And so it's just a natural part. I'm just a natural storyteller. And so that went completely toward doing a TED. And then it goes completely toward writing a book. And as you
Mhm.
know, I've written it like this, like I'm just talking to you right now. And people have told me it's very unique because of that. And they feel very embraced, very supported, and also carried through because of all the exercises. And I thought, perfect. So I'm
Mhm.
carrying my little readers along with me, which is exactly what I want to do. So I feel really
Yeah.
excited for what's happened and where it's all going to go.
And the main thing is when you have something that comes from such a deep place in your heart, it's 100% authentic,
Yeah.
and that's matters so much. I know with both of the work that we do, helping people, it matters to me. And it matters to me deeply. So it's not just something that, oh, I'm going to throw out there and have some fun with. I take it seriously. And that's what I appreciate about you. And I want to thank you for that, because I
Mm.
think that there's too much in this world that we don't know. Like we had spoke about briefly a little bit, how you don't know what people's intentions are always, and you don't always feel safe in this world that we live in today. And I think people are gravitating towards authenticity. And that's why, speaking from the heart, I think it's kind of important that we do touch on that that's where we kind of our two meeting of the minds is that's where it starts. You have to genuinely care about making a difference, in order
That's
to,
the bridge.
yeah.
If we don't move into that place, we stay black, white, yes, no, right, wrong.
Hmm.
It doesn't work. The bridge is finding out, well, how can I care about you and for you and with you, even though I might have really different opinions?
Right.
We tend to feel that we're defined by other people. And if I choose to let you define me, now I'm at risk. If I don't do that, if I say, no, I define myself and I'm hoping you'll receive who I perceive myself to be. But if you don't, that's okay. Then I'm no longer challenged by how you
Hmm.
view.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that in you working with, eventually, I guess you started working more and more with the couples, right? That's what,
Yeah, I started with
yeah.
teens. I started with
Okay.
teen children and I loved it and I was really, really good at it. But I could not stay working with the little ones because it was all child abuse and my heart was breaking. And I thought, I'm not
Yeah.
going to have children in the world if I
Mm.
keep working. So then I veered more so into teens. And then, as happens in life, different little areas sprout. I had a little season of cutters. I had a season of cancer. I've had a large season of widows because I'm a widow. And then it turned into couples and it turned into families. So as I get older, it keeps shifting.
Right.
But a lot of people won't work with couples because
Hmm.
it's incredibly challenging. It's much more simple to listen to one person's story and one person's perception and help them. But
Yeah.
I have three entities in the room that I need to cover. I have one person, the other person, and then the relationship. And the relationship's my primary client, but I have to attend to the others. And it is much more challenging. And a lot of people just don't want to do it. It's much more work. And I find it thrilling and fascinating and exciting. So I'm
Well,
perfect.
that's what we talked about. There's where the passion comes in, right? I sadly hear a lot where people are losing their faith in having lifetime relationships. They're losing their hope in that. And with me saying, what's the thing that you think about that really brings you hope? I find that some of my clients will say, well, it used to be to have a relationship with someone, and they've lost even the ability to picture that as a possibility. And I think that even single people reading a book such as yours can help them understand that there is a way you can approach a loving relationship that can be healthy, and
100%.
then it can end in the type of love that is that's all about compromise and true caring for someone, which is realizing that they're different than you and it's okay. And how did you come about deciding this particular topic, and how you wrote it from such a place of saying there's a way that you can learn how to do this? That's the kind of the question I felt you were answering the whole time.
Well, certainly a lot came out of my childhood with my mom. And
Mm-hmm.
then a lot came out of my marriage. The biggest piece of it was my clients. They kept saying,
Mm,
like, Heather, you need to give your exercises. Like your exercises are amazing. And
yeah.
I would say, I know, I know, I know. And they'd say, I want an app on the phone that I push it and what goes in is what I say and what comes out is how you say it. And
Yes.
people just kept saying that and saying that and saying that. So I started to work on the book, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't give it enough time. And then I stepped into doing the TEDx. And while I was doing the TEDx, I realized this is my book.
Yes.
It was a snippet of it.
Yeah.
And I had already created an online program on communication for individuals, which I had run. It's a 6-week program helping people understand the basics of communication, which we don't realize, and a lot of the pitfalls, which we haven't been taught. We haven't been taught how to have a really effective conversation. You think about it, a baby starts to mimic sound and then they do words and that's kind of it. And we say, be
That's right.
nice, don't
What does
interrupt.
that even mean? What does that mean? Yeah, I mean, and I absolutely agree. I mean, that's 1,000% why I'm in such a similar niche as you, because it's like especially in our society where people lean on texting and kind of shy away from even face to face conversation. It's like do we want this to be a lost art? No, having conversations is the basis of our connection. And
Yes.
so it's just so very important. And what I love is that, there's all different ways we can hit this. And one thing that you honor is that what we've been through in our past will affect how we approach our communication. It doesn't mean that you need to live in the past. I know that as a solution focused practitioner, we're not about being problem focused, but you honor the fact that things happened. And because of that, this is the way that I approach that. And I respect that a lot because I find that people move forward. I did a podcast about this recently. They move through figuring out the problem too quickly.
Mhm.
Nobody should be lingering to make them a victim. But at the same point, you need to honor the fact that this is a part of me and this is who I am. And before we even get it, we were going to talk a little bit about fear and that type of thing. But I remember I'm trying to find where I read in your book about this. There's lots of places that you said it, but you were talking. Oh, yeah, conversations that start with compassion create connection. And so, how do we have compassion in that way? Like, what are some of the things that you would suggest that we do to really put ourselves in a compassionate place for the person we're talking to?
Well, I start right there. So if it's someone that I know well, I'll say to them, there's something that I'd love for us to talk about. And it might be a little hard. And I want you to know that I value you
Mm,
and I care for you. And I want this conversation to go well. What I really want is at the end of the conversation for us to still be friends, to still work well together, to still be lovers. And so
yeah.
please keep me abreast if what I'm saying bothers you, disturbs you, you don't understand, because I really want to make certain that we are connected as we go through this. I
And
also
isn't that interesting though? Sorry to interrupt. Isn't that interesting though that step right there seems so simple and we skip right past it?
100%.
We skip right past it and think they should read our mind, you
And
know?
then when they're upset, we forget that we love them because the focus starts to be just this issue. And what
Mm,
happens when you're in that situation? You feel like you're not safe. You feel like you're not loved.
mhm.
So my viewpoint is find out how can you feel the most secure within yourself, with me, as we go through this. And there's a lot of little techniques with that. For some people, it's praying before you have a conversation. For some people, it's checking in every, couple of minutes and saying, are we still on the same page? For
Mhm.
me, because I was abused, I like to have a hand on my knee if it's a tough
Mm,
conversation. It grounds
interesting.
me. It also reminds me that the person's hand on my knee is not abusive.
Right.
And so I
Yeah.
feel we are together. And
I
that
did read, and I read that part that you talked about in your book, how that was a moving experience when that person finally did enter into your space and you allowed them in your space. Um, that what happens when when you're gripped with fear,
well,
when you
I
feel
think
as though fear is overtaking you.
honor it. Honor it because there's something that's going on that's reminding you of the past that right now is being exacerbated. And it may be valid or it might not be the reality. It doesn't really matter quite yet. What matters is for you to own it. Like, I don't feel safe. I need to do something to take care of me because I'm not quite sure right now if you're safe for me. And so
Yeah.
there's a place for you to either go within yourself, ask for a pause, say that you need to go to the restroom and clear your head because you're getting overwhelmed, and then come back. But when you're feeling fearful, it's very important that you go, unless you're like about to be hit by someone, it's important that you go back within yourself to ground yourself and connect with yourself. And if you're able, and a lot of times the flashback will come or the memory will come, if you're able to realize what is this reminding me of,
Mhm.
you'll see what's being, if you will, triggered or tugged upon in the present.
Yeah.
But know this, because this is the place where relationships are like such a gift. It's up, your body is bringing that up because it's aware that you can change your experience right now from what was injurious before. It might be to run away. I don't know. It might be to stay and to find out that you're not going to necessarily be treated that way again. There's a way to honor yourself to say, like, I'm not going to go through that unless I'm under attack and I have no choice in the same way. And then that person doesn't heal you, but that person can start to be a safe container for you to realize it doesn't have to be that way. And when
Yeah.
that happens, now you change your future. Now I'm no longer somebody who's always hit when someone gets mad. Now I'm someone who can be with someone who gets mad. We can take a break. We can take some deep breaths. We can come back, and I'm not necessarily at risk with you. There's a beautiful healing moment that comes when you're able to create a new experience in your present. And the trigger comes up for two important reasons. One, it's about to be exacerbated again, or that's your fear, and you need to figure that out to either get yourself out of that situation if it's high risk, or find a way to stay and change it for you going forward. And that's when you have a whole that it happens in every relationship to a certain extent because you create something you have not had with the other before. But in the difficult places, it helps heal a very deep fear that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that's glorious.
I think that's beautiful because I've said many times where you should turn around and rather than run from the fear, turn around and say, well, hello, how are you? There you are. You can't, they can't, fear can't chase you if you're
Right.
not running from it.
100%.
And
Action changes fear. So what
mhm,
do I need to do right now?
if you're running away from the fear, you're not actually taking action towards anything. You're just running away from it.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a picture of what you're showing us of how we might do that is taking a pause, asking where is this coming from, honoring it
Mhm.
enough to where it's not going to make you necessarily run away. It's going to make you take the action you need to take. And maybe that action is to get away, but it's
Mhm.
not because you're running away. It's
Right.
because you've thought through it and made that decision based on sound judgment and also checking in. That's what we need to practice. That's what we need to practice
That's how
in
you
every.
empower yourself in your life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be a victim of what the world necessarily chooses for me. I
Yeah.
get to make a choice. I had a difficult situation that happened a couple of years ago, and it was with a male who was choosing to create a very, very disturbing situation with my daughter. And I was trying to lessen it and soften it and like, it doesn't need to be this way and da, 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 da. And the person chose to continue. My daughter's an adult. She stayed too. But when we left, we talked about it. The person ended up walking out of her life. When we left, I talked about it and I said, was I helpful? And she said, not really. And I knew that. And I thought, okay, so Heather, there's something in this for you to learn. So I spent a couple of days asking myself, where have I been in situations before and it's male, when there's a male energy that is forceful, abusive, hurtful, that I don't do something that's necessarily helpful. And I went over
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
I was abused by my father. I was molested by my father. I had a boss who was awful at one point. There were situations in my life where when I stood up for myself to a man, I was either physically hurt, emotionally hurt, lost a job, or completely ignored and lied to.
Right.
And so what do? Pacify.
Right.
And I realized, dear God, why didn't I just say, this is not the appropriate time for this conversation? I think it would be wise for you guys to come about this at a different time. Sienna, I'm going to leave. Do you want to come with me? And I didn't do it. And
No.
I apologized to her. And she said,
Mm.
Mom, you needed to learn this.
Ah.
And
Oh,
I did.
don't you love that when your kids come back around at you?
And right. And she knows my life. So she knows, like, Mom, how, like, it hasn't gone well for you when you've stood up for yourself. Because I've stood up for myself and then hoped I'd have the outcome I wanted. Instead of
Right.
stand up for myself, it'll be whatever it'll be, but I'm not going to abandon myself in this.
I'm not doing it for the outcome. I'm doing it because it's right.
Right. And
Yeah.
that was a massive shift. And all of a sudden
Huge.
it shifted out of, I don't need to be fearful of that man or male
No.
energy that comes that's
Mhm.
forceful. I just need to take care of me. And
Yeah.
my daughter learned that too. And fortunately, she's 33 years younger than me. So she'll learn it so much sooner than I.
Yes.
And we're grateful for that experience together.
Uh-huh.
So there's a beautiful place in finding out, like, how do I honor myself?
Mhm.
How do I choose to take care of that fear in a way that's helpful and supportive of me? I might not be able to change this, but dear God, I'm going to change what's going on for me. I don't have to be at risk within
Right.
myself,
Yeah,
but that's
exactly.
child work.
And that's a lot of also choosing to allow yourself to be very comfortable with yourself. You know, like I think that I don't know how else to explain it, but being comfortable in your own skin of where you're at and this place that you are right there in the world, you know, because people are going to try and define how you're supposed to be, or, well, because of this, you're going to act like this. But the bottom line is we get to decide how we approach situations. And it's based on our past because we can understand ourselves, but even our future action is not based on our past because we have the ability to be in that moment and then change it, which
Yeah.
is what you did. Albeit late, the result was still the same because your daughter was like, okay, mom, you know, that, and then it changes the trajectory of the future moving forward when you approach it like that, you
100%.
know,
People will say you can't, that doesn't happen. And I've come up
it's
with a great analogy that's easy for people to accept. Let's say I was a smoker and I was a smoker for every single day of my life through yesterday. Today, if I don't smoke, I am no longer a smoker.
right. I mean, it makes sense, but people don't want to acknowledge that we actually are that amazing, but we are.
We are the
People are that amazing. We can do this. And I've seen it happen and I've watched it happen. And that's the way that relationships heal. It's
Well, you
two
learn
people.
that at some point, so you
Mhm.
can learn something different. And people will say, I'm too old to change. And I'm like, baloney. People hate this when I say this, but they laugh. You came into the world being able to pee, poop, cry, and maybe suck. That's it. What can you do now? And I'm like,
That's
yay,
hilarious.
you
They're
can
like,
change.
yeah, but what do you mean? Yeah, but
Yeah, it's a choice.
and
It's a
then it's also with all the brain research that we know now that we are regenerating and that we are able to literally recreate. When you look at all of the ability of what we now know about how the brain produces those pathways, and then we keep thinking because of confirmation bias that the same thing's going to happen again and again. But that doesn't support brain research. What it says is that we think it's going to happen again and again. But if
right.
we choose a different path, the brain will begin to acknowledge that as normal and that as what you expect. It's hard to do that. But I think we think it's harder than it actually is, you know, because once you begin to practice and believe that I can create new pathways in my mind that will create different results. And
Yes.
when you actually conceptualize that, then it becomes exciting. Like I want to create new pathways in the way that I relate with people, the way I talk to people, the way I approach tough conversations that, bring up triggers and so on.
Fear is one of the places where I think you can really see that most effectively, which is, and I use this with clients where there's been an infidelity. It's a
Mm,
pretty clear one, but it could be any place where there's fear. When you've done something that's hurt me and I'm fearful of you doing it again, what will happen a lot of times is there'll be something going on in the relationship and you're scared. So
right.
what happens is you start to believe that maybe you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. So since I've had that thought and I haven't checked it out, I start to look at things differently and I start to question
Yes.
things. And then
Yes.
your experience of me is I don't trust you. I don't really love you. I'm trying to find fault with you. And then you get uncomfortable with me. And then you start like, well, why are you judging me? And so now you seem defensive. And I had
Right.
a couple where this was going on. And I'm like, he's not doing anything. But you're creating an emotional infidelity going on right now because you're accusing him truly of something he hasn't done, which is now making more fear and more
Right.
disconnect. You're scared he's not going to stay and love you.
That
And yet
circle
what
just
you're doing
continues.
is
Mm-hmm.
creating that. And she went,
Yeah.
wait, what? I'm
Yeah.
like, "Do you see it?" And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I totally do." I said,
Right.
"So that's what we do as humans, and we don't realize it." There's
Mm-hmm.
such a beautiful truth if we hold on to it. You go into a relationship because you believe that person can love you, hopefully better than anybody ever has. And you believe that you can love that person, hopefully better than anybody has. If you stay true to that and remember that, then when it feels a little wonky, you say like, I don't understand what's going on. Like I'm missing something with you right now, or I'm not coming through for you. How do I need to love you better? You can stay in a place of agreement of I'm going to love you. And as long as you both choose that and remember that, then when the challenges come up, you remember you love me, not feeling it right now. Let's figure out what we need to figure out so I can feel it.
That's the
And then you
baseline.
can make
Yeah.
that correction.
Mm-hmm.
But we do it the opposite. We
Yeah.
say, I don't think you love me. Now I'm at risk. Now I'm
Right.
now I'm for sure not going to love you because you got to prove to me that you're worthy of my love. And then relationships go. Most relationships fall apart because one person has forgotten or does not see that the other person is loving them. And
Mm.
then we react.
And sometimes the way that they're choosing to show love, or that the thing that they're lacking and not showing love is not being recognized or communicated. It's two different ways of communicating, right? You can communicate the same exact thing out of fear or out of what I like to say hope, be just plain hopeful, because you could say, if you don't do that, this is going to happen, which is a completely fear-based statement. And it's
Yes.
said in so many arguments and parenting conversations and things like this. Why? Because let's just take a simple thing of, like, let's say, I don't know, having bad grades. Let's just, simple thing. If you don't get good grades, you're never going to get to college. Not even a true statement, but it shows that that person is approaching this conversation out of fear.
Yes.
If they said, if you get good grades, you'll have more options at college, then that approaches it out of hope, and the person is able to then approach it with hope. you
Yes.
know and I've done a lot of work with saying, if you think, like you said, face yourself and think about, how, in what energy am I approaching this? Because if I'm going to approach it out of fear, I'm going to say, the words I'm actually saying are going to be processed with anxiety. It's going to be taken offensively, and it's all because I'm coming at this at the fear of it.
You're
And
cre- you're creating.
right.
I tell clients and they laugh at this. I'm like, if I tell you outside the door right now is someone you hate, how do you walk out of that door?
All right.
If I tell you it's someone you dearly love, how do you walk out of the door? Like, there's no difference on the other side of the door.
Right.
So step into a situation, a relationship already with our predetermined thought processes. And a
Mm-hmm.
place where clients really struggle, the fear base, exactly like you've said, and then also criticism or request. I
Mm.
hate when you do this. Would you be willing to help me love you better?
It's an adjustment. Yeah.
Yes. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
people say it's so hard. I'm like, it's not. It's as easy as a light switch.
Right.
Now we get used to doing it a certain way, but that doesn't mean it's harder or easier.
Right.
Am I going to choose to express this future emotion or hope, or am I going to go for fear or criticism?
Yeah.
And to me, if I want to make a change, I got way more power in hope and future than getting stuck in what has been and anger. Now, I'm not saying what has happened isn't important. It's
Right.
100% important. But
Exactly.
since it's not working. So this came to me one time. Things come to me a lot, and I'm just like, what? And it was, you've got to dig yourself out of a hole.
Yeah.
And I went, no, you don't. Don't ever dig yourself out of a hole. No person has ever dug through the entire earth and gotten out. At some point, the walls are caving in. You put the stupid shovel down and you say, I got to crawl out, crawl out of a hole. So if you take that same truth with an emotional situation, I'm not going to dig myself out of this problem. If you think about what you do when you're trying to figure something out, you're in the middle of the problem, you're looking at it, you're like, it doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work. It doesn't work. What do you physiologically do at some point? You go, I don't know. You take a
Yeah.
deep breath, you lean back, you open up your eyes and you go, oh,
Right, right, right.
problem and the solution are different frequencies, different energies, and they're different eye focuses.
Exactly.
And when you realize that, then you can use that to help you move ahead and get into a different energy, which then brings different downloads to you so you
Right.
can have different insights.
It,
Yeah,
and it's nearly
magic.
impossible. It
Magic.
is. It is like magic. It is actually that dramatic. Like when you use that kind of wording, it is that when you watch it, I know what you're saying. When you're working with a client and you see the change, it's almost like you can watch something happen in their face. You know what I'm talking about. And you're
Huh?
like, holy moly, they just changed into a hopeful place where they were just in fear a second ago.
And they say,
And
got it. You're like,
yeah,
yes, you do. You got it.
right. And
Yeah.
then you feel at peace to be able to approach something differently because you're like, I feel at peace now to try this. And I think that's just beautiful, and I think that's why there's nothing like human relation, and just knowing people and loving people. And that's why it's so important that we use our mind to figure this stuff out, because the joy is in a real relationship where you have the ups and the downs and you care about each other is worth it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much truth in honoring where you are and knowing there's a reason why you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's not wrong or right. It just is.
Where you
Right.
need to be until you can find what you need. I had a person who said to me, she'd been sober of a certain habit for 9 months and then she went back to it. And so she called me really upset and frustrated with herself. And she said, I totally relapsed and everything that I've done is lost. I said, oh, no, it's not. You still
Not
have
true.
those
Yeah.
9 months of everything that you've learned. I said, but let's look at this differently. There was something you thought you would get in going back there and doing it the way you used to before. What was that? She goes, well, I thought it might work this time. I said, perfect. You thought it might work this time. Did it? She said, no. I said, okay, then you don't need to go back there again. You retrieved what you needed. And now you're free to really move on. But
Yeah.
we beat ourselves up when we go back to an old pattern. We have to hold ourselves accountable.
And that
But
can even be a communication pattern, in how we argue. Yeah.
yes, but it's important to say, okay, why did I do that again? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why did I think it was different this time? What did I think I was going to get? Well, I
I
thought
love
maybe
that.
you would love me this time. Did I? No. Like you didn't once again. I'm like, well, then are we going to keep doing this? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
And then they're not fearful of, I'm going to go back and do it again. So I tell people in some ways, like, I'm not hoping you relapse, but I'm kind of hoping you do, because then you've got the clarity of it doesn't work. Not in
But we're
that,
humans.
right,
But
right.
that's part of it,
That's
is that we have to realize we are not going to just be like, I think I got it, and now walk away. And all of a sudden, our communication patterns are a-okay from then on. We're humans. And we got to give ourselves that. That's why I like coming at everything that we can with a compassionate approach.
I think for the most part, do the very best that we know how to do.
Exactly.
And we mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of that. And
Right.
if you're not easy on yourself, but if you're gracious with yourself,
Yeah.
then you can shift more so. Beating
Yeah.
yourself up doesn't do any good. It just feels lousy.
So
Your thought, your head, you're going to have more communication with yourself than anybody else in your whole life.
isn't that the truth?
So it's important to think about, like, what's going on in here? How am
Yes.
I talking to myself? How am I showing up for myself? How do I view myself? How do I view you? And you know how it is when you've got somebody in your life who sees you better than you see yourself. And you're like, come on, like you see me like amazing. Like, I know, but I see who you are. And you're like, oh, you want to be that.
Yeah.
So if you're focusing on how much this person ticks you off and how angry you are at them and
Right.
I would say to people, speak into what you want. We're going to figure
Yes.
it out. Like this is gonna work out fine eventually. We just got to keep going with it. I think you're going to come through. I hope it's this time, but it's going to be pretty soon. We're changing. I believe
Yeah.
in us.
Yeah. And I think that's important. Like we talked about at the beginning, going into a conversation, being upfront about what you hope to get out of that conversation while you're in the conversation. And then even as you're ending the conversation, that
Yeah.
you are choosing to be transparent about how you feel about those moments. It's not about, I feel this, I feel that, but this is where we're at. This is what I hope for. It seems obvious when we're talking about it, but when we're in the moment, it takes practice. It
Well,
takes
yeah,
caring,
like your needs, your fears, your ego, they get
the
all
whole
involved.
thing. Yep.
Parts of us that have been hurt. It's very easy to say, just do this. But when you're in the moment where someone's mad at you, it's like,
And that's when you go back to old patterns. And that's when you got to have compassion on your own self because it's going to happen. I like to leave my guests with something they can do in their own mind, a very simple way that they can have one of these lessons.
well, one of the ones I love the most, and it's one of the most transformative exercises I've come up with. And it can be anyone. It can be your child, it can be your boss, it can be whomever. But someone you're in a relationship with, you can do it for yourself. Say, you're so important to me. I want to make certain that I haven't missed something that was important for you today. Is there a place I haven't come through for you? Or is there something that I missed that you wish I had?
Yeah.
And would you share that with me? Because a lot of times that goes on and we think the other person doesn't care. And so if they have forgotten something, didn't know, didn't share, what have you, it opens up that possibility. And then you thank them for that and say, thank you for
Yeah.
letting me come through for you because I really want to. And then you say, where did you feel the most seen, loved, cared for from me today? Thank them for sharing that and say, would you receive a little bit more right now? Now, here's the gold. If you do that every single day, you cannot say that whomever that person is, mom, boss, friend, lover, partner, you cannot say that they didn't try to come through for you. They didn't
Mm,
try to clean up any mess that there was. And also that they intentionally tried to love you deeply that day. So
mm.
those comments that we have, you don't really love me anymore. You don't care about my feelings. You don't see me. You don't hear me. You don't value me. It all gets thrown out because you show your partner or whomever every single day that that's not your reality. It
Yeah.
is gold. It's
Hmm.
gold for a relationship.
Honestly, that goes for any relationship you care about. You could
Yes.
say those same sentences to your boss before you end up throwing in the towel. It could change everything.
Or
Could
having
change
an
everything.
argument. I can't believe you forgot. Why wasn't this important to you? So if you open that up and just say like, I love you. I want to make certain I came through for you really well today.
Right. Or just this matters to me. This relationship matters to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that idea. That's something that all of us can do in our net. Well, we might have to put it on a sticky note and, keep it in our pocket so we remember
Yeah.
something. We got to trigger ourselves to remember doing that. But it is adding that extra step to our communication
Mhm.
of saying, this matters. What have I done that's helped this conversation? Oh, say the three again so I remember. So it's saying that it matters.
Right. You
And
matter
then
to
what
me.
was the first thing?
Is there any place today that I didn't come through for
That's
you?
right.
Or
The
is there
first
anything
we're saying,
that
is there a
says,
time when I didn't come through?
right? Because you're so important, I want to.
And then we're going to end with, when is a time that you did feel cared about?
The most seen, the most loved.
Most heard. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a
And
simple
can I
three-step
come through a
process.
little bit more for you right now? And then
Yes. And then you follow up with what else can I come? I'm telling you, you can adjust how you had said that and it can fit in many different relationships. And
yep,
I think it's powerful. I
it
mean,
is.
even in the parent relationship, people want to stand on the fact that they're quote unquote right or wrong. But that's even a powerful stance to take with your child because they have autonomy in themselves and they need to hear that you care. They need to hear that that you're honoring their thought process and what they need from you as much as you always, what do we do? We are constantly telling them what they need to do for us.
Yeah.
And a poor kid's like, I'm trying, I'm doing the best I can. But we turn and say, you know what? We're going to have a different type of conversation. Then the relationship is growing.
And you can't say, I don't get you then. You can't have
No,
that conversation
it
completely.
doesn't,
You
because it
might
doesn't
not
make sense.
have moments, but then you can say, but would you share that with me? Like, where
Right.
don't I? Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And I think that type of, I guess, sentiment is sprinkled all throughout your book.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you mean by it being a very like conversational type of situation. There are a lot of books that we pick out and we read that feels like it's telling you what to do. And there's a time and place for that. Sometimes I want to be told what to do, but I think that the reason that your book is picking up so much steam and will continue to do so is because it's doing it with that compassion that we need to be able to really say, you know what, there's a different way to approach things, and you approach it differently in your book. So I really encourage people to get it, hop onto Amazon, Speaking from the Heart. And I think that it'll be such a great addition to not only if someone wants to do it as a read together as a couple, just individually, just like I said, when I was reading it, I was thinking of my adult daughter who's not in a relationship right now, how much she would benefit from this as she's still healing from the relationship that she's coming out of, in preparation for her hopefully next relationship. She's holding on to a lot of this emotion that we need to be able to let go of in order to come into the next relationship in a healthy place.
Well, and it
So,
guides those questions you might ask in that next relationship too. I had someone reach out to me and she said, my mom just moved in with us,
uh-oh.
helping me tremendously with my 90-year-old mother. And I thought,
Yes.
hallelujah. Yeah, hallelujah.
It's,
But when you come from the place of speaking with the heart,
yes,
it's a different conversation.
it is.
And we
It,
all want to be loved. And if we remember that, then there's a way of, well, then how do I extend that to you in this conversation? And if I'm
and we
not
want to be
going
loving
to
if
do
we're
it,
honest with ourselves. We forget because we're like, I'm right. I want to talk. But really, you want to be a loving person too. So why not learn to approach that? Yeah. Yep. Well, I think that sometimes things are just as weird as it is that we came together and got to know each other. I think it was just always meant to be that we just had each other's back in this world. So I'm so glad that you're able to come on this podcast. And just as we're wrapping it up, I mean, I want people to be able to find you and work with you and just glean more from you. So tell us more about how we can get a hold of you, Heather.
oh, thank you. I so appreciate you. And I'm so excited to keep walking this journey with you in all the ways that we will. So it's my website. You can find everything you need on my website. So www.drheatherbrowne.com. And there's freebies on there. You can see my TEDx. Obviously, there's the link to my book. I have workshops, blog, any questions that you have with working with me or anything you just want to ask. I
Yeah.
love hearing from listeners. So please feel free to reach out. I'd be honored.
Most definitely. And then hop over and get the book, of course. It's reasonable. It's a great addition to just even to gift it to a family member that wants to hear this information. And I think that we should kind of like leave this on the fact that, making connections are important. And caring about this type of stuff is important. As we go out and we do this work in the world, each and every person that's listening, they have their own things they're trying to accomplish in this world and their hopes and dreams. And I know that if you go out into this world with leading with hope, then the things that are going to happen to you the world will conspire for you to make those things happen. And so hopefully that is what we do this next week, is not only change how we communicate, but also lead with love. So anyway, thank you, Dr. Heather Browne. It's been a pleasure. And thank you for coming on our podcast. And until next time, we'll talk again later.